This is the 12th video in my Targaryen King series, in which I explore and analyze the reigns of each Targaryen king. Aegon IV was the 11th king to sit the Iron Throne, and he did so for 12 years. This occurs in the decades after the Dance of the Dragons, but before the Blackfyre rebellions, which Aegon IV directly caused. His misrule can be characterized by a complete inability to control his own desires. Aegon the Unworthy did with the realm as he pleased, and it can be argued that no other Targaryen did as much harm to his own dynasty and realm than he did, although his great-grandfather Viserys gives him a fight for that title, as does the Mad King. Quite the Mount Rushmore of awfulness. Aegon was the first child of Viserys II and Lara Rogaire of Lys. At the time, Aegon's uncle and namesake, Aegon III, was the king, and his queen was 8 years old. Daenerys wouldn't give birth to their first son for another 8 years after that, so Aegon's birth in 135 AC gave some much-needed insurance to the Targaryen succession. He was born third in line to the Iron Throne, and by the time Aegon III died, he was still fourth in line, and then third in line once more when Daemon the Young Dragon died childless in Dorne, and then second in line once Baelor the Blessed starved himself to death. This one Aegon sort of caused. The reason Baelor was fasting was because Aegon and Dana the Defiant, Baelor's sister, had a bastard son. More on that later. So it's safe to say Aegon III's branch of the family was a disappointment. That left Viserys II to take the throne at age 49. Prince Aegon was already 36. Yes, Viserys was 13 when his son Aegon was born. To put things in perspective, Viserys II became king in 171 AC. He was 49 and his son was 36. Aegon's son Daemon was 18 and just had his first son the year before. So before the age of 50, Viserys II was already a great-grandfather. The point is, this family is messed up, and Aegon had a messed up childhood. His father was young enough to be his brother, and his mother, Lara Rogaire, left Westeros and went back home to Lys when Aegon was just 4 years old, and she died 6 years after that, when Aegon was 10. So Aegon might not even remember her, and his siblings, Aemon and Naerys, who were 3 and 1 respectively when their mother left, probably don't either, unless they visited her in Lys. So Aegon's father was too young to be a father, and his mother was an absentee. And even his aunt, Daenerys, was only 8 years older than he was. Aegon was older than all his cousins, and didn't have any mature adults in his family to be his role model. Rather, it seems he was left to his own destructive vices as a young prince in King's Landing. In 153 AC, Aegon married his sister Naerys. He was 18 and she was 15. Their brother Aemon joined the Kingsguard after the wedding, and became known as Aemon the Dragonknight, one of the finest warriors in Westerosi history. Unsurprisingly, these three kids had very unhealthy relationships with each other. When Aemon was born, Aegon was caught beating him in his cradle with his own dragon egg. The brothers were nothing alike, except in their physical appearance. Before Aegon got fat, at least. Aegon was lustful and witty and douchey, whereas Aemon was somewhat pious and celebrated by the court. They were sort of like Aegon II and Aemon in House of the Dragon, if Aemon wasn't also a complete psychopath. During Daeron's conquest of Dorne, Aemon proved his valor by taking a poisoned arrow meant for his cousin, the king. The realm loved him, and singers made him and his sister the subject of their songs. Aemon and Naerys had a lot more in common, and probably loved each other. They're said to have had a doomed love, a very tragic, subtle romance. Naerys was forced to wed Aegon. It's tradition for the eldest Targaryen son to marry his eldest sister. Aegon the Conqueror happened to want both of his sisters, but it was said to be his duty to wed Visenya. Aegon the Unworthy did his duty as well, and it's said that on their wedding night, Naerys cried, and Aemon and Aegon got into some sort of fight. Perhaps the Dragon Knight was defending his sister against the bedding ceremony. If so, he failed, because Aegon bedded Naerys that night and many other nights almost certainly against her will, and she gave birth to their first son, Daemon, at the end of that year. Naerys looked like Daenerys, but lacked her strength. She was born sick, and nearly died in the cradle, and grew up slender and frail, with nearly translucent skin. Her birth of Daemon nearly killed her, and she begged to be free of her marriage to Aegon and to instead join the faith as a septa. Naerys always comforted herself with the seven-pointed star. I have done my duty by you, and given you an heir. I beg you, let us live henceforth as brother and sister. That is what we are doing, Aegon replied. Despite Naerys being told another pregnancy may kill her, and despite the fact she was constantly pale, tired, and emaciated, Aegon forced her to perform her wifely duties. Eventually, Naerys died in childbirth after only having 2 healthy children across 4 pregnancies. Her story is among the most tragic in all A Song of Ice and Fire, and paints a fair picture of the kind of man Aegon the Unworthy was. Unwilling to save his sister from a life of pain, ungrateful of his brother's selfless valor, uninterested in his son's wise counsel, and utterly unprepared for the office of king. Aegon's father, Viserys II, only reigned for a year until dying of a quick and suspicious illness. Aegon was suspected of poisoning him, which seems a little weird. Aegon had no political desires that we know of which would have inspired him to take the throne as early as he could. He was enjoying life as a spoiled prince, and knew the throne would be his one day anyway. So why kill his father just so he could do the same things he was already doing, except now doing it as king and making his dynasty look even worse? Clearly, he didn't care about that. And the maesters write that Aegon ascended the throne he coveted as a boy. So putting 2 and 2 together, I guess Aegon always wanted to be king, and just couldn't wait any longer, so he poisoned his dad. It's actually far from the worst thing he ever did. Aegon's court was based not on merit, but on their ability to flatter him and amuse him, and on the women's willingness to let Aegon use their bodies as he wished. In fact, it was to his own court and those closest to him that Aegon harmed the most. He wasn't a pyromaniac like Aerys the Mad, or a violent warmonger like Maegor the Cruel, or even the Conquerors. The small folk saw his reign as a source of gossip, and the lords who did not visit King's Landing saw him as harmless. However, Aegon was a danger to, and manipulative of, those who dared to enter his circle. Of course, we only have The World of Ice and Fire and some sporadic references in the main series to tell us about Aegon's reign. If Fire and Blood Volume 2 ever happens, we'd get a more detailed picture of exactly how Aegon misruled Westeros. We're simply told that, on a whim, he often took from one noble house to give to another, and that he deprived men of their rightful inheritance when he desired their wealth, as rumors claim he did following the death of Lord Plum on his wedding day. His misdeeds were localized to harm individual people and families, especially his own family, except the time he almost invaded Dorne. This was 174 AC, 2 years into Aegon's reign, and it made no sense for Aegon to invade Dorne. His son and heir, Daemon, was married to Maria Martell, and they just had their first son, Baelor Breakspear. Their marriage was arranged by Baelor the Blessed to secure peace with Dorne after Daemon the Young Dragon's failed conquest. Aegon the Unworthy meant to succeed where the Young Dragon failed. Prince Daemon was friends with Dorne, and lords who were fed up with King Aegon's behavior had flocked to his son Daemon. Daemon was seemingly the only person willing to tell Aegon no. King Aegon knew that disinheriting his son would cause a rebellion, so by invading and conquering Dorne, Aegon could remove Daemon's strongest ally. At the time, though, Daemon Blackfyre was only 4. If Aegon wanted to disinherit Daemon, who would he name heir instead? The whole situation wasn't very well thought out, and luckily Aegon's new war fleet was wrecked in a storm before it reached Dorne. Aegon also ordered pyromancers to build wooden dragon contraptions with pumps in them that could shoot out wildfire. He thought they'd be helpful in a siege down in Dorne. But the experiments failed, and he burned down a quarter of the Kingswood, along with hundreds of men. Aegon was dangerously incompetent to the point of committing mass manslaughter with fake dragons. This failed attempt to invade Dorne wouldn't be the only time Aegon tried to undermine his son's power. He was jealous of how much more popular his brother Aemon and his son Daemon were compared to him. It doesn't really get much better than Aemon the Dragonknight and Daemon the Good, who were the only 2 people who could make Queen Naerys smile. Aegon the Unworthy had any woman he wanted. Lords would bring their daughters to court hoping Aegon would sleep with them, and thus grant favors to the father. Aegon's style of diplomacy was essentially, if you let me fornicate your daughter, I will give you privileges, but I'll also do whatever I want regardless. For example, he once went to the castle White Walls and slept with Lord Butterwell's 3 daughters, in exchange for a dragon egg. We see it in the Duncan Egg story, The Mystery Knight, and Bloodraven is able to take the egg back under Targaryen control, though it probably ended up burning at Summerhall. Aegon also corrupted the City Watch. In exchange for promotions to higher ranks, Gold Cloaks would make sure brothels were ready to receive the king. And not only did Aegon visit sex workers, he also turned his lust upon any woman of King's Landing who caught his eye. He never spent a night alone, and he claimed to have slept with at least 900 women, 9 of which he truly loved. Speaking of Aegon's appetite for women, let's look at his many mistresses, in order of appearance, and keeping in mind that nearly all of these were women who Aegon cheated on Naerys with. First was Lady Felaena Stokeworth, who took Aegon's virginity when he was 14. In response, his father Viserys wed Felaena to the Lord of Harrenhal, but Aegon made frequent visits there to see her. Next came Mary Meg, a blacksmith's wife, who Aegon purchased as if she was a slave. She and Aegon had 4 daughters in 4 years, until Viserys found out, sent all the girls to be raised as septas, and returned Meg to her husband, the blacksmith, who then beat her to death. A happy love story if there ever was one. Then there was Lady Cassella Vaith, a Dornish noblewoman who Aegon took as a hostage back to King's Landing after Daemon the Young Dragon sort of conquered Dorne. When Dorne killed Daemon, Aegon gave Cassella up for death, although Baelor the Blessed pardoned all the hostages. In her old age, Cassella believed Aegon truly loved her. Next was Belager Otherys, the Black Pearl of Braavos. She was a half-Braavosi, half-Summer Islander captain who Aegon met on a diplomatic mission in Braavos. Yes, that's how stupid Baelor the Blessed was. He thought Aegon the Unworthy was capable of foreign diplomacy. Through 10 years of knowing each other, Belager had 3 children, which were probably Aegon's, though it's unsure. Next would be Dana the Defiant, Aegon's cousin and King Baelor's sister, who was kept in the Maiden Vault. He'd often help Dana escape the castle, and she became pregnant with a bastard son, Daemon. News of this pregnancy sent King Baelor into a spiral of fasting, until he starved himself to death. Then came Lady Barba Bracken, who Aegon had known for years, as she was friends with the Maiden Vault sisters. Aegon named Lord Bracken Hand of the King, just so Barba could be at court. She gave birth to Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel, just days before Queen Naerys gave birth to twins, a stillborn son and a daughter named Daenerys. The queen almost died giving birth, and there was open talk in the castle of Aegon marrying Barba Bracken if she did so. Naerys survived though, and her son Daeron and her brother Aemon came to her defense, forcing Aegon to send away Barba and Aegor. As Barba was a Bracken, it made sense Aegon's next mistress should be a Blackwood. Melissa was kind and generous, and even Naerys, Aemon, and Daeron liked her. She was Aegon's mistress for 5 years, during which time she bore 3 children, last of which came Brynden Rivers, or Bloodraven. Aegon loved Missy so much, he decreed that the 2 hills between House Blackwood and House Bracken should go to the Blackwoods, and they were then called Missy's Teats. This was after he already gave those hills to his previous mistress, and called them Barba's Teats. When Barba made fun of Missy's breast size, Aegon defended her honor by giving her family those hills. By this point, the Lords of Westeros knew the game Aegon was playing, and their daughters suffered for it. Bethany Bracken was groomed for the sole purpose of usurping Melissa Blackwood, which she did. However, Bethany found Aegon fat, foul-tempered, and otherwise unworthy, so she fell in love with the Kingsguard, Sir Terence Toyne. Once they were discovered abed, Toyne was dismembered, while Bethany watched, and then Bethany joined him in death. Toyne's brothers tried to avenge Terence and assassinate King Aegon, but his brother and loyal knight of the Kingsguard, Sir Aemon the Dragonknight, gave his life to save the king. A year later, Naerys would die as well, and Aegon did nothing to honor them. The 9th mistress is potentially the saddest. Lady Jane Lothston, the 14-year-old daughter of Aegon's first mistress, Felaena Stokeworth. There was a non-zero possibility that Jane was Aegon's own daughter, and yet he slept with both her and her mother at the same time, until he gave Jane an STI and banished them from court. Finally, there was sweet Serene of Lys, a rumored sorceress, and the last daughter of an ancient, impoverished line of Valyrian nobility. She was cold to Aegon's court, and it's said that she was much older than the king, but she kept herself young and beautiful with magic. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but Serene died in childbirth, bringing Shiera Seastar into the world. The only one left to check King Aegon's misrule was his son, Daemon. But after the deaths of Aemon and Naerys, Aegon kept furthering the rumor that Daemon was a bastard. Aegon wanted an excuse to disinherit his own son just because Daemon wasn't as degenerate as he was. Apparently, Daemon Blackfyre loved Princess Daenerys, Daemon's younger sister, but King Aegon saw an opportunity for profit with the Archon of Tyrosh. So Daemon got betrothed to Rohan, and Aegon gained the Tyroshi fleet in case he ever decided to try to invade Dorne again. Eventually, under Daemon's reign, Daenerys would marry the Prince of Dorne, and officially unify Westeros as a single kingdom. Daemon's forced marriage to Rohan of Tyrosh, and Daenerys' subsequent marriage to Prince Martell, was the straw that broke the camel's back, according to George R.R. Martin, and turned Daemon against the Targaryens. There was also a love triangle between Aegor, Brynden, and Shiera, 3 of the Great Bastards, but that occurred later on. As children, during Aegon the Unworthy's reign, Aegor was raised with the Bracken half of his family at Stonehenge, while Brynden and Shiera were seemingly raised in the Red Keep. Even though his mother Melissa Blackwood was dismissed, the book says Brynden was able to keep close relationships at court. Maybe he spent time both in King's Landing and at Raventree Hall. Regardless, Aegor hated Brynden because it was for his mother that Aegon the Unworthy dismissed Aegor and Barba Bracken from court. Also, the Brackens and Blackwoods have an ancient rivalry, so they were never going to get along. Later on, Shiera Seastar was more interested in Brynden than Aegor, which turned him all the more bitter. Bittersteel. Brynden Rivers is, of course, Bloodraven, the weird tree wizard who Bran meets in the main series. It's left ambiguous as to whether Bloodraven is also the three-eyed crow who visits Bran in his dreams, or if they're 2 separate people. Perhaps the crow is Bran from the future. Regardless, Bloodraven tells Bran he had a brother he loved, a brother he hated, and a woman he desired. The woman he desired is pretty obviously Shiera, Star of the Sea. The brother he hated must have been Bittersteel, who ended up slicing Brynden's left eye. The brother he loved is, in my view, a toss-up between Daemon and Daemon Blackfyre. Daemon was 22 when Brynden was born, and could have been a father figure to him since Aegon the Unworthy sucked so much balls. The more tragic answer is Daemon, who was just 5 years older than Brynden. The two may have grown up as friends, but when Daemon Blackfyre rebelled, Brynden remained loyal to House Targaryen. I'll talk a lot more about the Blackfyre rebellions in my Daemon II video. Speaking of Bloodraven, it may have been during his young, formative years that he realized his green-seeing ability. Raventree Hall is one of the few southern castles that still has a weirwood heart tree, and the Blackwoods are descended from the First Men, just like the Starks, and they still worship the old gods. The weirwood at Raventree Hall is dead, but hundreds of ravens still flock to it every night. Maybe the current, 125-year-old version of Bloodraven is still seeing through the eyes of his childhood weirwood tree. The catalyst for the Blackfyre rebellions came in 182 AC, when a 12-year-old Daemon Waters won a squire's tourney. King Aegon rewarded his bastard son with the sword Blackfyre. There was precedent for a sitting king to bestow Blackfyre upon another Targaryen. King Aenys gave Blackfyre to his brother Maegor, which was a terrible idea. Blackfyre is a symbol of Targaryen power and legitimacy. When Aenys gave Maegor Blackfyre, he was conceding that Maegor was stronger than him, and it gave many people the idea that Maegor should be king. Daemon took not just the sword, but also the name, and became Daemon Blackfyre. We're told that if King Aegon had just let his heir, Daemon, have the sword, who was both trueborn and 17 years older than Daemon, the Blackfyre rebellions would never have happened. It was obvious that King Aegon hated his son, Daemon. He was everything Aegon wasn't: popular, responsible, generous, and intelligent. Aegon spread rumors about Naerys committing adultery with their brother, Aemon the Dragonknight. and that Daemon was actually their son, a bastard. These rumors spread, and eventually a knight called Sir Morgul Hastewick accused Queen Naerys in public. Prince Aemon defended Naerys in a trial by combat, and killed Morgul Hastewick, but he was unable to slay the rumor. This lie about Daemon's parentage followed him for years, and Aegon brought it up once more when he decided he liked his bastard son Daemon more than his trueborn son Daemon. So Aegon gave Daemon a sword and thus a name, as well as lands and other honors. He betrothed Daemon to Rohan of Tyrosh, ensuring him a noble wife to give him heirs, and ensuring himself the Tyroshi fleet. It was lucky that this is when King Aegon the Unworthy died, in 184 AC at the age of 49. If he lingered any longer, he may very well have plunged the realm into war with Dorne, or named Daemon Blackfyre his heir over Daemon, causing a rebellion. Aegon died in extreme pain, though nothing compared to the pain he caused his family and the realm. His skin was swollen, and he was too obese to lift himself off the sofa. His limbs were rotting off his body. With his final spiteful decree, Aegon legitimized all his bastard children, and then descended into the Seven Hells. This final act put a dark cloud over the beginning of Daemon II's reign. All the great bastards, like Aegor, Brynden, Shiera, and Daemon Blackfyre, could now take the name Targaryen if they wanted. Daemon Blackfyre was now a legitimate piece of the Targaryen succession, coming after Daemon and his 3 sons. King Daemon did his best to ensure a peaceful transition of power. He let Daemon keep Blackfyre and all the land promised to him, and made sure he married Rohan of Tyrosh. He thought keeping Daemon close was the smartest way to avoid conflict, but his efforts were futile. The poison Aegon the Unworthy unleashed onto his kingdom reared its head during Daemon II's reign, and caused generations of blood and despair known as the Blackfyre Rebellions. Aegon's bastards had been the bane of the Seven Kingdoms ever since the old king died. But we'll talk about that in future videos, since Daemon Blackfyre was still only 14 when his father died. Aegon the Unworthy's reign is a textbook example of how not to rule a kingdom, and he repeated some of the same mistakes his great-grandfather Viserys I made. Both Viserys and Aegon were extremely careless with their own succession, and directly caused massive wars. Viserys wanted his daughter Rhaenyra to become queen despite the fact he had 3 sons. Viserys then proceeded to do nothing to help Rhaenyra ascend the throne. He could have named her Hand of the King and gotten the realm used to her leadership. He could have married her to Aegon so they wouldn't fight a war against each other. He could have forced the Greens to publicly bend the knee to Rhaenyra. Or he could have just stuck with his patriarchal guns and let Aegon be king, thus avoiding conflict entirely. Viserys did none of this, so the Dance of the Dragons happened. Aegon the Unworthy had a perfect heir in Daemon, yet still, he spread rumors about Daemon being a bastard for his own selfish reasons. He showed favor publicly to his bastard son Daemon, and might have named Daemon the heir if he didn't die before he could do so. Regardless, Aegon legitimized Daemon and gave him and half the realm a reason to provoke war against House Targaryen. The key difference is that Aegon the Unworthy intentionally sabotaged his legacy and undermined his heir. Viserys did so unintentionally. He was a special kind of stupid. The saddest part of Aegon the Unworthy's lack of interest in his realm is that his children actually could have made a great team if they weren't turned against each other. Daemon II was mature and diplomatic. Daemon Blackfyre and Bittersteel were fierce warriors. Bloodraven and Shiera became intelligent spy masters, with a dash of sorcery as well, perhaps. Imagine the great bastards working together to administer Westeros instead of fighting each other in the Blackfyre rebellions. To use another historical parallel, we can look at Aegon the Conqueror and the Sons of the Dragon. Aenys and Maegor were each half of their father. Aenys was measured and kind, whereas Maegor was strong and capable. If Aegon had raised them together, they could have ruled the realm together as well, Aenys as king, and Maegor as his strong right hand. The lesson here is that Targaryens never learn their lesson. The next video in this series will look at Daemon II and the beginning of the Blackfyre rebellions. Let me know in the comments where you rank Aegon the Unworthy among the worst Targaryen kings. Thanks for watching and subscribing.